So welcome everybody to our monthly meeting, July 31st. Today we have an agenda that will probably be relatively light compared to usual. I know I've said that before, and Mike told me earlier that I said that before, and it didn't turn out that way, but it probably will this week or this month. Anyway, so first thing I want to talk about is a survey the City of Ottawa is doing. So they're doing a survey on EVs that I would encourage you guys to go and fill. We'll talk about that in a moment. Then we'll talk about Bloomberg New Energy Finance. So, and their EV Outlook for 2023. So, Bloomberg New Energy Finance is one of the foremost financial analyst firms that looks at various things like green energy and EVs and a whole bunch of other things that are part of the new energy space. Okay. And they're making prediction on market share and all that. And we'll go through that and we'll contrast some of their predictions in their latest report in 2023 with some of the older predictions they did. And some of you haven't seen our projections. I didn't put them in the slide deck, but you'll see that their projections are getting closer and closer to ours. But we'll get there when we get there. So I was going to talk about heavy duty trucking. I didn't have time to prepare that for today. One thing I will mention though is that I was looking up a bit of data on it. Didn't have time to really look at it in depth. But we're seeing more and more heavy duty trucks being delivered in mostly in Europe at this point. So the Tesla Semi, we've all been waiting for it forever, right? It's starting to ship in small numbers right now. They're only going to do volume production, I believe, starting next year. But they do have some in the roads. Meanwhile, though, while Tesla was working on developing the truck and all that, there are many, many other trucking companies, so trucking manufacturers that have actually taken the lead. So if you look at Volvo and you look at MAN and a whole bunch of other different trucking, Mac, I can't remember them all, and some of them are combined, right? So there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the trucking OEM space. So a lot of them have consolidated. But bottom line is there are many of these companies. I think actually probably every one of them, even Cummins Engine, which their specialty is diesel engines. They're working on electrified power plants, okay? And in Europe, they're starting to deploy them in large quantities. We're talking about thousands of heavy-duty trucks hitting the roads. It's still a small percentage of the overall fleet, but it's exciting to see that really happening. And we'll talk about that a bit more when we look at the Bloomberg stuff. Then we'll do the news. So Mike will do the news as usual. Then we'll talk about past and future events. Quite a few things coming up in August, so should be an interesting month. Then we'll do the roundtable as usual, okay? So first topic is the City of Ottawa. They have a climate change newsletter that just came out last week sometime. And in there they have a link for their EV survey. So if anybody would be interested, I would invite you to talk about, to go and answer the survey. It's really about charging and charging infrastructure, where we'd like to have it and all that. You've heard my opinion on that before, but just to say that I think that what should happen is long term, most charging will happen at home, and what we need to have as many plugs as we used to have for block heaters back in the day, right? So, and I think eventually by sometime around probably 2040, just about every parking spot that's assigned to someone will have charging. That being said, we'll have needs for other charging, so especially high-speed charging for people who are visiting the city and want to be able to charge up to be on their way, right? So visitors and people who don't have access to charging at home, will be some that won't have a permanent parking spot, so garage orphans, and they will need to charge somewhere, right? So if you look at the survey, it's kind of interesting how they bring that up and how they ask the questions about where and how you want to charge and all that. So I'd invite you to go and fill that out, okay? Takes only a few minutes. It is, I don't know if Mitchell's on there. If Mitchell, are you on? Is Mitchell on? Can anybody see him? So Mitchell House works for the city, so he's probably one of the ones that organized the survey. So if he's not on, he's not on. Okay. So I was going to ask him to make a few additional comments if he wanted to, but if he's not there, we'll go on to the next topic. So any questions about that? No? Okay. So the first main topic is Bloomberg New Energy Finance, right? And their EV Outlook. The report, the 2023 report is available for free download. So I would encourage you, if you're interested, to go and look at the report and look at it in more detail. You'll see that it's quite interesting in what it covers. I'll spend some of my time explaining why I think the report doesn't do justice to things. But it still has some very interesting data that's really, really, I think, important to understand. So if I could get the thing, there we go. So the way the report works and the way they do their forecasts when it comes to new energy solutions, so solar, wind, batteries, EVs, and all that. They have two main scenarios that they talk about. Okay, so the first one is economic transition scenario. Bottom line is it's a scenario that assumes that economics is going to cause a transition to happen. Okay, I'm oversimplifying it a bit, but bottom line is they're assuming here that there's no massive government intervention to force people off of fossil fuels. Okay, so one of the consequences of that is that in 2050, they believe that we won't be at net zero in 2050 unless there's government intervention. Okay, so the other scenario they have, and you'll see the differences in their projections based on the scenarios for some of the data that they have. Net zero scenario assumes that we are net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And they assume, and this is their assumption, not necessarily mine, that to get to net zero by 2050, we need government intervention. So some policies put in place that will drive people towards net zero. Okay. So just to explain that a bit, and then there we go. Okay, so the first slide, just explain a bit here what we're looking at. So this is a projection that was done in 2020. Yeah, it says right there. Okay. So in 2020, they were forecasting what you see here on the right-hand side. So in particular, they were forecasting that by 2025, 8.5 million electric vehicles would be sold in that year. Okay. But the reality is in 2022, only 2 years after their forecast, we were already at 10.5 million. Okay. So one of the things here is that New Energy Finance and others really underestimate the market growth that we could expect. Okay. They also say that there would be a drop in the number of vehicle EV sales in 2020. There was a drop in overall vehicle sales, but not in EV sales. EV sales continue to increase, and so we did not see a decrease in 2020. So they were assuming 1.7 million. I think the actual number was 2.5 or something. I can't remember the exact number. So there was no decrease in 2020. So you see that just 2 years, their forecasts are significantly off. Okay. And again, for those who haven't seen our forecast before, I think most of you haven't, but Renton and Bruce, you wouldn't have. I don't think so anyways. Our forecasts are essentially that by 2030, just about every new vehicle in Canada will be electric. Every new vehicle sold in Canada will be electric. The fleet won't be fully electric by then, but or just about every new vehicle sold will be electric is what we forecast, okay? And I don't have a slide that shows that, but we've covered that before. So just a slide that talks about the fleet mix. So this was pulled from a 2021 report, and this was pulled from the 2023 report with data from 2022. Just wanted to show you the increases we're seeing in fleet. This is fleet here. It's not sales, okay? Sorry, it's got both. So here, vans and trucks, 1% in 2021. Were EV sales, 3% in 2022, a large increase. And they say that the fleet here of vans and trucks is almost 1 million EVs. That seems like a large number, but it probably has a lot of smaller vans included in that. This would not be all heavy-duty vehicles, although it would include heavy-duty vehicles. Passenger cars upgrade or upsize in share from 9% to 14%. Okay, significant increase in market share. Buses, this is a bit interesting. And I think there may be some issue with the quality of the data because the size of the fleet actually decreases here and the percentage decreases. I know that China had stopped subsidizing e-buses at some point, and that may have caused the share to go down, but the actual number of buses shouldn't be going down, excuse me, because all of these buses would be relatively new, right? So I'm not sure how they come up with that. The other thing that's interesting, and we talked about this before too, is 2 and 3 wheelers. You might remember that when I went to China, most of the vehicles, the 2-wheelers that I saw, were actually electric. There were very, very few that were gas powered, and you probably all know that 2-stroke engines are really bad for generating pollution and all that, and smog and all that, right? Well, 49% of the sale of new 2 and 3 wheelers globally. This is all global data. So globally, 49% are electric. Okay, so we're seeing this happening in countries like India and other countries like that where low cost mopeds and all that are making their appearance, right? So large increases in market share all over the world. Okay, this one here. So the diagram on the left is from 2022. The one on the right is from 2023. And I just want to point out that so 2025 is the last year they have here. 20.6 million is what they were projecting. Here, 1 year later, they've increased that to 22.4 million. So again, we're seeing their forecast was, let's say, like this, and it's every year the forecast is getting higher, and we'll see that specifically in another slide when we talk about cobalt production. So bottom line is they're saying here that the dotted line here is the global average. They're saying that by 2026, okay, 2026, not far in the future, they think 30% of the share of light-duty EVs or passenger EVs, passenger vehicles will be EVs. Okay, so not very far in the future. I would think the share will actually be somewhat bigger than this, but that's what they're predicting at this point. And the year before, they were predicting somewhere around 22%, I believe, and here they're almost at 30% in 2025. Okay. Peak combustion engine, they're saying, is behind us. So in 2017 is the year that we sold the most internal combustion engines, and there's been a steady decline since then. Mike, I think it was the last meeting, you showed your projection or your numbers, and we see clearly there that the sales of ICE vehicles is going down dramatically. It's down, what, 40% from the peak, I think, something like that? Yeah. So 40% from 2017, whereas EV sales are going up like crazy. Hybrid sales, so plug-in hybrid sales in particular, they're pretty flat, but electric vehicle sales are going up substantially, okay? What else can I say in here? Notice the difference between this graph and this graph here? I'll give you a clue. It's a little blue line we see here. There's a little blue line that represents fuel cell vehicles, okay? In 2023, gone. It's gone, okay? So this is Bloomberg New Energy Finance finally realizing that fuel cell vehicles are not practical for light-duty vehicles. They still believe that heavy-duty vehicles will be hydrogen, but we'll see something interesting about that in a future slide. But anyways, bottom line here is this is if you look at the graph at the lower right-hand corner, that's the fleet, okay? And they're saying that by 2040, the fleet will be there'll be a substantial portion that's hybrid. I don't believe that particular number, but there's still going to be quite a bit of internal combustion engines. I would think in Canada in particular by 2040, will probably be somewhere around 90% electric at that point. Okay, so the numbers, I think, really underestimate what we are seeing as trends and what we've done as projections. So heavy duty trucking, this is the only slide they have in there that talks about that. And what they're talking here about is the total cost of ownership of various fueled types of heavy-duty vehicles in various parts of the world. I have trouble believing this. Remember the conversation we had last month about the comparison between the fill-up of hydrogen versus the fill-up of electricity, and diesel should be in between. So why would diesel be the cheapest solution in China by this is in 2030? I just don't see that, because battery electric is about half the price currently, and I can't see how it would be more expensive at that time. So, and actually fuel cell, that considerably underestimates the cost of the hydrogen. So just for those who didn't see that, saw an example. I think it was last month that I showed that, and we talked about it. So there's an real world example where they took a real world hydrogen truck and a real world battery electric truck. And the cost to fill the truck with hydrogen was around $2,200 US versus $153 for the electric counterpart. Now, I think they played with the numbers a bit. The electricity was underpriced but even if you made it 4 times the price, which would be about actually a bit more expensive than what you pay at a supercharger today, it's still only about a quarter of the price of the equivalent hydrogen. So I can't see how the economics could be that close here. Okay. So the next slide they have this themselves, they compare their forecast, and this is a forecast for cobalt demand. So before we had LFP batteries, everybody thought that, we'd run out of cobalt, right? And nickel also, by the way. But their forecast in 2019 was that by 2030, we need 300,000 metric tons per year of cobalt. Their forecast now is half of that. And I would argue it's possible that this is even a bit more than what we actually currently need. Okay, so that's about twice the production of what we have today. They're a bit less than, actually, not even, it's about 20-30% more than what we have today. Okay, so you may have heard, or seeing news stories about, oh, we're going to run out of cobalt, so we're not going to be able to make all these EVs. Well, they're realizing, and everybody else who knows anything about batteries and what's happening with LFP is realizing that we don't need as much cobalt as we thought we did. Okay, so there's 2 things happening. When you look at Tesla, my 2 Teslas, a 2013 and 2021. The newer one has about 70 or 90% less cobalt than the older one per weight. Okay, so it's a lot less just there. They're putting a lot less in the same size of battery, but also LFP batteries don't have any cobalt at all, right? We've got phosphate and iron instead of nickel and cobalt. So yeah, so this is by substituting something else, but also the other thing that's considered constraint in supply, but isn't really, is lithium. Lithium is expensive though, right? So what we're seeing in China right now, there are actually cars being sold with sodium batteries in them. So instead of using lithium, they use sodium. The energy density is not as high, but the energy density is rapidly climbing up as they're doing more R&D on them. It's getting better, and sodium batteries will be very appropriate for static storage, because the weight for static storage is not important, right? And sodium is so much more abundant than lithium, 10 times or more than 10 times, actually probably 100 times more abundant. So okay, another little piece they have. I don't know why they threw this particular piece in there. That's probably because the founder comes from the UK. But this sort of parallels some of the things I was saying about vehicle to grid, okay? So they're saying, and again, these are the conservative numbers they have. For the UK in 2040, there'll be 28 million electric vehicles is what they're saying, okay? Reality, there'll probably be more, but for argument's sake, let's say it's 28 million, okay? They're saying in terms of battery capacity, that's the equivalent of 1,649 gigawatt hour of capacity, of storage capacity. That's a huge amount of storage capacity. Now here, if you look at the details at the bottom here, it says that if you assume that you have 10 kilowatt, I should say, bidirectional chargers for small vehicles, and that buses and trucks have 50 kilowatt bidirectional chargers, that means that by 2040, they would have a capacity to discharge 287 gigawatt. Okay, so that's the equivalent of about 287 nuclear power plants. That's a lot of capacity. So if you run the numbers like I did the presentation before for Ontario, the numbers are comparable. But I'm not sure what the peak is in the UK. My guess is the peak would be somewhere around 30 gigawatt. Well, this is many times above the peak in the UK, right? So we could use EVs, a small percentage of EVs to shave the peak and all that. And they're showing some numbers there that would support that. Other things they have in their report that are interesting. The first thing on the left, that's the demand for oil worldwide. Okay, so there's a dip there due to the pandemic. Okay, and what they expect is that by 2050, and I have real doubts about the 2050 number in particular. I think it'll be much lower than that. But anyways, they're thinking that we're going to see a gradual decline. Now, you remember that during the pandemic, when we had a decline, it was relatively modest of demand. The prices actually went negative. Okay, so small a portion of decline has a major impact on prices. So when we start seeing this decline, they think the peak demand will happen in 2029. I can't see how that could make sense because we've got peak ICE vehicles already. But anyways, that's what they're predicting. So they're saying here, well, we'll see. 2050 is a long time. Maybe we won't be around to see it, but I think the drop is going to be bigger. This here is a difference that they're showing. So for net zero, it has to come down to zero here, right? Or very close to zero. And this would be the economic transition scenario. Okay, they're saying 20 million barrels per day. This is road transport. They're talking road transport only. Okay. So steep declines. But I think given the numbers that we have predicted, I think it's going to be sooner than that. Okay. Now this series of graphs here addresses the people who say that the grid's going to come crashing down if we electrify every vehicle. This is the amount of electricity that we need globally in different parts of the world if we electrify the fleet. Okay, so do they have yeah, they have the two scenarios. So one is the economic transition scenario, one is net zero scenario. And you see that with net zero scenario, you see a steep increase in electricity demand there. That's because they assume a lot of electricity is going to be used to make hydrogen. Okay. I don't believe it will be that high. We'll see. But I don't believe it will be that high. But bottom line is you're looking at 12% here and 14%. It's not a huge increase overall, and it's over a period of what, 25 plus years. Okay, so that we're talking about 0.5% a year increase in the amount of electricity that needs to be produced. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we need more production resources. We just need to be able to use our existing resources more effectively and increase in some cases, but it's mostly about making it more efficient, right? So we have very, very low demand at night. If we charge our cars at night, we're using capacity that would be otherwise unused. Battery factories. So we've had many discussions about the capacity for making batteries worldwide. And this is really interesting to me anyways, because it shows the actual amount in 2022. So almost $60 billion was invested in 2022 in battery plants. Okay, that's a lot of money. Should be able to make lots of batteries with that. They're saying that under the net zero scenario, and this includes stationary storage, it's not just EVs, it's all storage, battery-based storage. They're saying that between 2023 and 2030, we need to spend actually less than what we spent in 2022, and about the same in the decade after, right? So we don't need to spend that much money really on batteries. I mean, if you look at the numbers, even I think the numbers that Tesla had when they had their whatever it was, the day where they talked about the battery day. It was not the battery day, the other one. Yeah, so they talk about how much is required to invest, and I think they overestimate what's required. In particular, with Tesla, they don't foresee using car batteries to store energy. To return energy to the grid anyways. I don't see V2G as being something that'll be useful. Yeah, the Musk doesn't see that. So because he thinks every Tesla is going to be a robo taxi that's going to be running around all the time, right? Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. Some will, so, but not all of them. Okay. So interesting stats in terms of what they think is needed. And again, they're slow walking this thing, but by 20 but with this scenario here in the NZS scenario, we're looking at net zero by 2050, right? So it's still fairly aggressive in terms of what we need.
Okay, so time for the news. So 7 automakers. We'll start off with the big story. 7 automakers, including Hyundai, Kia, GM, BMW, some others, Honda, weirdly, are banding together to make a brand new charging network from scratch that will have 30,000 new EV chargers by 2030. The first opening next year in the US and then Canada to follow after that. To put that into perspective, that is more chargers than both the Supercharger network and Electrify America combined. And that's what they're planning on building out now. They're aiming to build a bigger network than the 2 biggest networks today. So good for them. Yeah. And they will be CCS and NACS. Sorry, Leaf people, Chatamo is not, it's dead, sorry. So they'll probably install NACS and maybe some CCS to support legacy cars. But there you go. So that's really cool. And our Ionics, for the many people in this room that have Ionics now, there's like 4 of us in here. There's 4 in the parking lot. This is awesome. So we will have a kick-ass charging network to use because it's Hyundai building it, so it'll work properly. So that's cool, right? And we're sticking to the Hyundai Kia front. So Hyundai has revealed and released the Ioniq 5N. It's the first electric N car that Hyundai's making. It has a lot of horsepower, 641 horsepowers, which is like double what the current Hyundai Ioniq 5 has. They have speakers inside and outside the car. So this is an interesting twist where you can set 3 different noises. There's like a futuristic EV noise. There is a jet noise, so you can make your car sound like a fighter jet to people on the outside of it for some reason. And then there's ignition, which they recorded a Kona N, the engine noises, and then you can pretend you have a gas car for some reason. So you can be loud and faster. Who knows? So a lot of people like making noise and going slowly in their Subarus. So those people now have a car that you can buy that's electric. So there you go. 84 kilowatt hour battery pack, so it's a bit bigger. Same range as the current Ioniq 5s. Expected release spring next year. And it has a rear windshield wiper for those of you that just can't get over that. And it has like cool new body bits. So that looks cool. All right. Another thing, if you're an Ioniq 5 owner, the ICCU failure campaign has now launched as of July 18th. So if you have an Ioniq 5, book a spot at your dealer and have your car checked out, unless it's already failed, like Sam and mine, and then we're probably good. We're pioneers. It's already been replaced, so we're probably fine. But yeah, it's a free update. It's a free repair. It's all warranty stuff. They figured out the problem, I guess. And so it affects all Ioniq 5s and Ioniq 6s in Canada, as well as all the Kia EV6s and everything built until June of this year. So the symptoms are, as you see in the picture, there is a symptom. So the first thing you'll notice on the dash is your 12-volt charging light is on a lot more than normal. Like it's on every time you get in the car, basically. And this happens for some amount of time that could be weeks or months. I'm not sure. But I noticed it too, for a few weeks at least, where that light was always on, it seemed. When usually it's like just rarely on. It's on sometimes, but not all the time. And then, yeah, one day you'll just be driving. You may or may not hear a pop under the back seat. And then your car just freaks out and does this. And then you have to stop and have it towed. So get your car checked out as soon as you can if you haven't had this issue already. Sam and I, we're probably good for another year or so. And then we'll have to get ours checked out, I'm sure. I think there's a software update involved, so they might have to update something. But anyway, this affects EV6s as well and Ioniq 6s. So if you just got your Ioniq 6, you probably need to have this done. It usually happens about between 13 and 20,000 kilometers or 1 year. It seems to be the window where it starts happening. So keep that in mind. All right, not to dwell on that. The Bolt is re-alived, as we say in the new internet world, because you're not allowed to say dead on YouTube apparently. So it's unalive, and now we're re-alived. It's going to be an Ultium platform vehicle. So it looks like they're still going to stop production this year as planned, and then there's going to be a gap, and then there's going to be a new Bolt at some point, which they are fast tracking to production. No word on price or specs or performance or anything, just that it's Ultium, so it'll probably charge faster than the current generation of Bolt. It probably will have similar or better range because it's unlikely they'll go lower, and the price point should be similar because why change that? It might be up a little bit because inflation, which is code for corporate profits. But yeah, so no worry whether the EV and EUV will make a return, just the Bolt. I think they're dropping those monikers, so who knows what that's going to be. And they did release a teaser picture with different lines than what Bolt owners are familiar with, so it looks like they've already designed a car. So watch this space. All right, so I was asked about this on the Facebook group, and this is the only reason it's in here, because it's ridiculous. Okay, so this guy, he has a startup called Aleph, and I mean, he looks trustworthy, right? He doesn't look like a Bond villain. And he is going to make the first electric flying car that will hit dealers by 2026. That's 3 years from now. Unheard of in the aviation world, of having a clean sheet aircraft go from nothing to showing up at dealerships of all places for the low price of $300,000, and it's all electric, 2-seater. Never, this platform is completely new. The bubble in the middle is where you sit, and then the whole vehicle rotates around you to fly. So if your trigger finger is itching to push buy on this cheap $300,000 airplane, keep in mind you can buy a Cessna 172 for about the same price, which is a real airplane, and seats 4. It has a range of driving 200 miles, whatever that is in real money, and a flying range of 110 miles, which I know as a pilot is not a lot. And a ground speed if you're driving it as a low-speed vehicle. So its max speed is 40 kilometers an hour. So as a car, it fails, and as a plane, it also fails because there are cheaper, better planes for the same or less money. You can buy a Katana. There's even an electric Katana coming out. So it's never going to happen. I'm sorry, it's not. This is like, startups like this happen all the time. They never amount to anything. It is extraordinarily difficult to have anything certified. The news is making it sound like, oh, they got FAA certification. Yes, they did, for an experimental. I wrote it here. It's a special airworthiness certificate. And what that means is that the FAA is like, sure, we will allow you to fly this contraption that you're inventing. And if you kill yourself, that's your problem. But we're like, you're not allowed to sell it to people. That's what the special part is. Right. So, yeah, I mean, they needed that in order to test fly it anyway. Like Boeing gets those all the time, too. But make no mistake, this is not going to happen. This thing is completely ridiculous. So mark my words. And if I'm wrong, then I'll buy you a beer. I don't know. I'm not going to be wrong. All right. So Stellantis and LG Energy. They've resumed construction of their plant in Windsor. So in the news many months ago, we talked about how they stopped production because the Liberal government didn't actually give them the money they promised. So now apparently the money's flowing again. So a factory is being built for Stellantis, which includes all of these brands, but Jeep and Chrysler are the main ones, and Dodge for North America. So this will be feeding whatever Stellantis EVs are going to come out soon, hopefully. But yeah, there you go. So that's that. Okay. Now, the government of Canada has announced a phase out of inefficient fossil fuel subsidies to the oil and gas industry. This is good. We want this. We are the first G20 country to do this, so that's also good. In 2009, the G20 promised that they would do this, so it only took Canada almost 2 decades to get there, but we did. So cool. Go team. The guidelines are on the screen if you want to read it. That's awesome. Basically, there's some exemptions. that the oil industry is absolutely not going to use the loopholes to get around having to do these things. But they don't apply to loans or guarantees or equity or the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which is the one that the government bought for reasons, or the Coastal GasLink pipeline, which is the one that's being built to sell more gas, because that's great. Environmental Defense points out that currently we spend $19 billion a year on the oil, or 18 billion, I think, 19, 18, in that ballpark, 19 billion to the oil industry every year in Canada. So that's cool. And then my favorite were the quotes from the various people who are quotable. So like the Alberta Environment Minister, she says fossil fuels aren't a problem. And this is the Environment Minister of Alberta, by the way. Okay, so fossil fuels are not the problem. Emissions are the problem. I think Alberta might need to work on its science education a little bit. Ottawa's top priority should be working with provinces finding more effective ways to help industry cut emissions, like not burning stuff, maybe, I the thought. Cool. Energy for a Secure Future, which promotes natural gas, said it doesn't believe Canada has an inefficient gas and oil subsidy program. So there's nothing to cut because all the subsidies are efficient, according to the gas industry themselves. So they're annoyed. And then the oil sands people, the ones that have the ads on TV that we talked about last month, the ones that are like, you can hear them on the radio, these ads, they are saying they're pleased to see the guidelines and recognize the need for partnerships and stuff. So when the gas industry is pleased about an end of subsidies to the gas industry, I'm a little concerned because it means they've already found the loopholes and are happy about them. This is the Pathways Alliance, by the way. So good first step, but I think we need to sort of turn the screws a bit more. So watch this space. Okay. So speaking of Chevy vehicles that are new, the first 2024 Chevy Blazer EV has shipped from Mexico to the US. So that means deliveries in Canada are coming soon too. It's the Equinox and the Blazer are the new vehicles that will be coming out of this plant. The Blazer appears to be first. The price points are on the screen. They start at 47,000 US and they go up from there. Those three trims, the 2LT RS and the expensive SS one, are the first three, and then the cheaper version is coming out next year, at the end of next year, and the more expensive one is coming out early next year, the SS version. There is a police pursuit version, so we should probably start pushing the city of Ottawa to look into that one, because that is custom for cops. And it probably, they haven't released specs, but it's probably the same pack that they have in the Lyric, so around 100 kilowatt hours. The range should be around 400 to 500 and something kilometers. All pretty standard stuff for Ultium platform vehicles. So that's good. New EV coming to the market, so I'll have to update the buyer's guide. Right, so Toyota is struggling in China. No surprise to anybody that follows this industry very much. They are very reluctant to transition to EV. They have exactly two models, the BZ4X, or the BizForks, as we call it, and the BZ3, which is only available in China. And built by BYD. So they've had to lay off a bunch of people. Actually, it's GAC that is the partner for them in China, but BYD probably supplies the batteries. Yeah, so they sold just 3,800 BizForks in China through January. And this is at a time when China saw 2 million sales in that period. So 3,800 out of 2 million is a tiny fraction, barely worth rounding. And the reason they sold so few is because the BZ4X, as most of us know, does not compete well with current vehicles in the market. If you compare spec for spec, it is the same price as a Model Y, but has shorter range, slower charging, problems with the wheels falling off, and like no front. Like it's missing a lot of EV things for the money. And so when you compare it to other vehicles, and China has an extremely competitive market. Like it's not very competitive in Canada's market, but China has a lot more EVs that are available to them that we don't have, from BYD and GAC and a bunch of other companies that we've never heard of. And their market is even more intense than ours. So if you don't come bringing the goods, people aren't just they're not gonna buy your EV because there's so many others to choose from, right? And that's what's happening to Toyota. Their showing is not great. So Yeah, and this is true not just for Toyota. This is true for all of the Japanese companies at this point. So they're talking Honda, Mazda, Nissan. They're all seeing falling sales in China as gas cars are increasingly shunned, and their EV offerings are lackluster. So this is the first crack in the Japanese auto dam, if you will. All right, VW is in talks with Tesla. So we were all wondering last month whether VW would start looking at NACS, and it turns out they are. So this is a good sign. They're responsible for Electrify America. Electrify America already came out, and Electrify Canada already came out saying they will support NACS, and now VW corporate is talking with Tesla about adopting that connector as well. So it looks like basically the entire auto industry will be switching over to NACS, hopefully fast, so that it's a Band-Aid that gets ripped off quickly. Don't know if there's much else to say about that, but there you go. All right, so the Tesla corner. So Tesla is coming out with the Cybertruck, as we all know. They have released some details about it. There's some pictures of it testing, so we can see it driving through water here, which is cool. Last month we saw it being Arctic tested. So Tesla has confirmed that yes, they are shipping these trucks around the world to do various certification and final tests. These are validation tests, and production will begin in Giga, Texas by the end of the year, is what they're saying. And it looks like that will probably be true. They're also saying it's the first sub 19-foot pickup truck with a 6-foot bed and 4 doors, which is a shot across the bow for GM and Ford and everyone, saying your trucks are too big and wasteful. So yeah, I mean, if we take them at their word, that's pretty cool. And they also shared some pictures of the production line and all that. So they have the first vehicles coming off the line now. So if you're a Cybertruck order waiter, then fingers crossed, it's coming, it's coming. Be excited. And now some less rosy news for Tesla. It's cut off on the screen here, but it should be all right on the slides. So the Tesla has been misleading about their vehicle range. I know we talked before the meeting, Craig mentioned something about Tesla range. This might be the explanation as to why you're seeing that. So according to Reuters, and Reuters is not just a slouch at journalism, like they're pretty legit, they do some real journalism. Musk instructed Tesla engineers to artificially boost the range estimates in Tesla vehicles at high states of charge so that people wouldn't have as much range anxiety. So when they looked at their car fully charged, they'd be like, oh my God, I have all the range that he promised. And then what happens is that there's an algorithm so that when you get to 50%, it shows you the real range of your car, which sort of fits the anecdotal reports we've heard from a lot of Tesla owners where they're like, the range estimate looks great. And then, as you get closer to low, it starts getting a little alarming that you've lost a lot of range somehow. This might be why, because there's an algorithm to mask the real range of the vehicle at all states of charge. He wanted to show good range numbers when fully charged, said the source. They created a diversion team. So if people, there are some people that are very nerdy and will test their vehicle and make sure that the numbers that are stated match real world. And when they came up short, they would contact Tesla and say, hey, my car is broken. Like, I'm not getting what you're promising. And so the diversion team's job was to divert those people to not maintenance people, to basically give them spin. It was a spin organization. So they would deal with the customers who raised complaints about inaccurate range. And they had a bunch of talking points. And some of them were like, well, weather affects the range and it's just an estimate and blah, 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 which is all true. But like people like Bjorn were noticing like, hey, like these discrepancies are more than just what you can account for with temperature, right? Like something else is going on. And so now we know something else was going on. So that's not great. But if you own a Tesla, that might be why your range when you're full looks great. And then as you drive, it's less and less. So there you go. And then the Auditor General for California is also investigating Tesla over full self-driving. Talked about this a little bit earlier with the robo-taxi thing. But several Tesla owners and former employees of Tesla have approached various organizations in the California government to file complaints and stuff like that. And so the AGO has decided to take on a case and an investigation to see what's going on. Essentially, people are complaining that they spent thousands, tens of thousands of dollars on FSD capabilities as far back as 2014. It has been promised next year since 2014 by Elon. And so people with early build Teslas with FSD, their cars are now 7, 8 years old. And they're saying, look, I spent all this money 7 years ago and you didn't deliver anything. So I want a refund, or I want to transfer it to my new Tesla because my car is getting old. And up to this point, Tesla has said no, like no refunds, no transfers, not happening. Most recently, they did allow for transfers to a new vehicle in the third quarter only of this year. If you have a Tesla and you're looking at a new one, you can transfer for a limited time your FSD to your new Tesla from your old one, which might be a response to this investigation. But basically, it's not looking great for Tesla at this point. And I think that is it for me. And that is it. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Mike, I attended the Tesla Owners Club of Ontario last fall, and they talked about this range issue that you brought up.
Okay.
One of the main comments upon there, and this is by a Tesla rep who deals with all this type of things, so you can take it for where it comes from, is the range on your car. There is a huge difference between driving at 105 and 150.
That is true.
And a lot of people, they don't get that. But if you take a look at on a Tesla, if you go like your menu and you take a look at your destination, there's a graph there.
Mhm.
And you can tell right away if you're going to make it or not. And I've got over a couple 100,000 miles on 2 different Teslas here. And that graph is pretty accurate when it comes to your range, as long as you keep it below 105.
Yep.
And
that's a great point.
I'm giving this emphasis because you really emphasize that point.
Yeah, that's a great point. And my dad brought up this actually, that he noticed that graph, the range on that graph isn't the same as the one in your display, right? And he's like, why are there 2 ranges showing in my car? And I was just like, I have no idea, Dad. Like, the range on the graph seems to be the accurate one, and then the other range seems to be the made up algorithm one.
Past events. So we had a couple of kilowatts on coffee this last month. We've been fairly busy. So when we're busy, we have less kilowatts in coffee, although we've done some, those are a lot of fun when we're doing it before we're doing an event. And there's a bit of carryover, right? We had that at, when was it? I'm missing one there. Yeah, in Maryvale, before we did the event at the Food Basics, and I forgot to put the event at the Food Basics, I think, in there. Anyways, before we did the Food Basics event, we did the kilowatts and coffee, and it was a lot of fun to do that. Yeah, lots of people. Yeah, so we had an OREC in-person event on July 8th. It seems like it's forever ago now. That was quite interesting and a lot of fun to talk to people there. Now, I think that in hindsight, we were in the middle of the crux of the bubble in terms of the audience that was there, right? So you've heard me talk about reaching outside the bubble. If people who aren't environmentalists or aren't familiar with EVs, you want to get to the general public to talk about EVs. Well, OREC members are really the opposite. Most people are very familiar with EVs in that group, and actually many people drove there in an EV or a plug-in hybrid. So actually someone borrowed Mike's mobile charger to charge. It was a Volt, right? So it was a very interesting gathering. So next is the Capital Cruise for Kids Car and Bike Show for CHIO. Interesting event, not as busy as we thought it would be. We did have some good conversations though with a few people. But anyways, that was at the Giant Tiger on Walkley, yeah. And we did have some conversations with some people who were very EV naive, if I could put it that way. and we managed to make them understand that EVs are not the threat that they think they are, and that they're better than ICE cars, right? So
You missed the Food Basics event. So at the Food Basics event, I know one person that literally went from our event to a dealer, bought an Ioniq 5,
yeah.
and emailed me about it
Oh yeah,
because she had questions.
cool.
So
So sometimes you don't have very many discussions. The Food Basics, we didn't have that many discussions, but we had some pretty good discussions. So I think it was worthwhile. So Canada Science and Technology Museum, again, not, I think this is one of the cases where it illustrates that our display has to have something that says electric vehicle. It says EV experience. It doesn't say electric vehicle. So people who know nothing about electric vehicles, they say CEV and they have no idea what it is. So they just go elsewhere, right? So we need to ask Enviro Center to get some, maybe a roll-up thing that has, right? Okay, so that's it for, I forgot again, the food basics. So next events, next meeting, August 28th here. What's on coffee? There will be just one this coming month, and it will be in this coming Saturday. Yeah. The rest of the weekends we are actually busy. So lots of interesting things happening, and I would encourage you to please sign up for. If you're not an official volunteer, you could become an official volunteer, Carl. And now I remember your name, right? Yeah. No, but we're always looking for other volunteers, right? It turns out that we have an event on the 19th, which I'll talk about when we get there. So Navan Fair is the next event. So the 10th and the 13th, it's a 4-day event. We're not doing test drives though. We just have a booth. We should have an F-150 Lightning. We need to confirm him or get a replacement, right? Well, I don't have a replacement right now. We'll look for one. And we'll have another car there, I think. Yeah, we have space for another car. So anyways, we'll talk about offline. So we should have 2 cars there, the tent and the trailer, and we'll be talking about EVs, talking about the events that we have. The weekend after we have the test drive event, right? So it should be fun. There's some things, if you have never been to the Navan Fair, there's a few things you might want to, admission, you'll get free admission with it if you're a volunteer, okay? There's actually a demolition derby. I don't know if you've ever seen a demolition derby in person. It's hilarious. It really is. So it's a lot of fun. You wouldn't think it's fun, but it's a lot of fun. So they have tractor pull, horse stuff. They have a whole bunch of stuff in Midway. So I think it's nicer than Capital Fair. Yeah, it is very outside the bubble, so that's an opportunity for us. Our location is actually quite good. We're really centrally located, so we should have lots and lots of traffic. So we'll be looking for lots of volunteers. We have some time slots that are completely empty at this point. Haven't checked since I sent the email last night. I'm hoping there's a few more people volunteering, but we need at least 2 or 3 people per shift to be able to keep up, right? Okay, and again, it will include the admission, and the admission. I mean, the whole thing. It's an experience. So the event after that is Saturday, August 19th. Originally, we had thought that this would be in October. But fortunately, it's been pulled forward to much more better weather for test driving. So August 19th, we'll be doing test drives in Barrhaven. So there's a possibility of borrowing some cars, right? Maybe some people will lend their cars, but I could probably get some from Tesla to supplement what we have, right? So let's try to get there. So anyways, it's not a very long event. It's 10 to 2 p.m. But it's going to be a bit intense if we have every. I think they put a break in there for me. I'm not sure. Yeah. We'll figure it out. We'll make sure. Well, people don't show up, or we could swap drivers or something for 1 or 2 things. So it's at Larkin St. Patrick School in Nepean. So it should be a good event. Given that we have that many bookings, I'm surprised it's so far in advance. We're getting that many bookings. I was hoping to use the Navan Fair to drive attendance, right? So, but we're almost full. So if we could get more cars. Okay, so the event we have after that is Capital Pride, actually. We have just a booth with, I don't know if we even have a tent, or we could put the tent. But anyways, we're going to try to at least put the tent. And there's 2 shifts, so it's going to be fairly straightforward. Nicolas there for the full day. I think I'm there in the morning. I've got something in the evening, but if someone else would like to join us, there's other booths there. There's other vendors that are there. So we're going to be among a bunch of different different vendors, and we'll have an opportunity to observe the Pride event, right? Which I think will be quite interesting to see. So, just booth and all that. We're going to talk about our events, and it should be interesting. We'll see how it goes. That's really part of being outside the bubble, right? So, the other event we have after that is Westport. That's September 9th. So this is September now. Okay, so into a bit further. So September 9th. We already have 5 people for that. I'm not sure we need more. If other people would like to come, you're more than welcome to join us. But we have 5, so they're doing an event where there's going to be a bunch of EVs and other stuff. Watercolor is a development in Westport by Landark. That's a net zero development. Okay, so the promoter of the owner of Landark is very, very big into net zero developments, and wants to promote EVs and all that. So that's why we're doing that with them. We are actually booked for a car show there next year. Okay, next year in July, I think it is. But we'll worry about that next year. We're not going to worry about it for now. Okay. And the very last event we have is September 23rd. We talked about this before. There may be other events that pop up, but I'm unsure at this point. But this will be the biggest event, I'm hoping, of the year. This is a repeat of what we did with SmartNet Alliance before. So SmartNet Coalition now that they're called. And we're going to have test drives. We're going to have a bunch of other stuff, other sustainability solutions. And we're inviting dealers to help out. And we want to see Transporter bring a bus and a bunch of other things that we're working on to make that a bigger show. We have Sam that will be there as the electrician with a booth beside our board there. So it should be an interesting show. Okay. So anyway, so we do have quite a few people registered already. We could use a lot more. So we're going to have static display, and we're going to have test drives. And we're going to do some presentations also. There'll be a stage outside where we could do presentations. There'll be a stage inside like usual with booths inside for people who do solar and heat pumps and that kind of stuff. But us with the car stuff, we're going to be outside. Okay, we'll have also e-bikes. So Envir Center, actually, they are organizing the e-bike portion. They're going to have, and actually they're talking to Pitago downstairs. We're supposed to be talking to Pitago downstairs to be there. So they want to have 5 bike/e-bike vendors. There'll be a test track where people could test drive the e-bikes. Okay, very similar to last year, so it should be good. Okay, any questions on any events? No? Please sign up. Please sign up as soon as possible. If you can't make it, put no in the spreadsheet, but tell me if you can. Okay, as soon as possible, because the less I have to run after people, the better it is for my health and for my schedule. And the more we can plan in advance, right? So as you saw with the 19th, it's over 2 weeks away now. It's almost 3 weeks away, and we have lots of bookings already. So knowing well in advance who's available and which vehicles are available is really, really helpful for us.
You have a free lunch for volunteers.
Yeah, there will be a free lunch for volunteers for sure. Yeah. It won't be a super long day. We're talking about 10 to 4. But it's usually a lot of fun. I mean, we've had a lot of fun over the years. We've had some years where it was pouring rain and then we had to, hide, and we had almost nobody, but we had years like last year that was pretty good where lots of test drives, and that is a picture from last year. Yes, absolutely. So you see the weather was perfect at that time. It's a crapshoot at that time of year, right? We never know what we're going to get in terms of weather. So the next thing I want to cover is membership. So if anybody, the membership, the informal rule is you get to attend one meeting for free, but then the membership, you need a membership after. There's some people who have lifetime membership. So for those who don't know, Renton Patterson is here. Renton is, I forgot to mention at the beginning, Renton is one of the founders of EVCO way back in the 80s. Yeah, so back when EVCO was doing conversions and all that, it was Yeah, it's a while ago, so we haven't been. We still have people once in a while that are interested in conversions, but it's a lot less of an issue today because we could buy cars already made. The economics still make sense, but if you want to do for a project for fun, you know, it's probably a good project, but the economics aren't there, right? So that's why we don't do a conversion generally. But anyways, for others, the membership is only $23 online. Okay, $25 cash. So we have the cash option because we had a member before who didn't like to use electronic stuff. But anyways, most of you are members. That's not a problem. We don't have that much money. We use it mostly to pay for insurance and to pay for a few little other things that we need to expend during the year. Most of the money, for those who may not be so familiar, most of the money that we have for the EV experience, well, actually all of the money, I should say, comes through EnviroCenter and partners that provide money to EnviroCenter. We don't see any of that money directly, right? We see it through reimbursement of lunches and things of that nature, but we don't, and things like the tent was paid by them and a bunch of other things. And the very last slide before the roundtable is the update to the EVCO channel. Do you want to talk about that? No? Okay. So Mike has been running the EVCO channel on YouTube. And like, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier. I think I mentioned it to you guys earlier that we put our meeting recordings on there. We put other stuff on there. There's a few other things we've done. These are presentations we did to the city of Ottawa. And so there's one in French. So anyway, so there's a few other things in there that we've linked to in terms of presentations, and we're hoping to make that more active. So if you want to subscribe, please do so. We have 72 subscribers up to now. Not a huge amount, but you know, every little bit helps. Sometimes I get directed to videos where the subscriber for the channel, the number of subscribers is quite low. So we just need to find ways to you know, make it grow a bit faster. So, okay.
All right. So if you're watching us on YouTube, as Sam was just saying, you probably didn't hear, this is where your video ends. So if you want to participate in the roundtable, join us live. We are the last Monday of every month, except in December. And yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next month.